Well, this is the big story in the NHL this season. Jets, 15 wins in their first 16 games. Quickest any team has ever done it in NHL history. Previously, 5 other teams had won 15 in their first 17. Most recently, the 2022 Bruins. Jets will try to continue this remarkable run against the Lightning Thursday and the Panthers on Saturday. And that music means it's time for me to get up. I haven't done this for a while. The walkover, heading over in the expansive Studio 9 to hang out with my friend Frankie Corrado and talk a little NHL action. Frankie, how are you? You've been on the road for a little while.
Good, buddy. It's nice to be back. It's always very friendly around here.
Yeah, and we, it's not even freezing in the studio tonight.
Yeah, often it's nice.
Often it's very cold in here. So the Jets... Man, what a story. First of all, hilarious that they are underdogs. I get it's MSG. I get that, it's not a home game, but this is a team that had won 14 games going in. But that's the kind of game on Tuesday night against the Rangers that they might not have won last year.
Maybe not as consistently, right? Like the Jets last year win a lot of these tight games, the defensive checking style of games, and then when they really needed that extra goal or to open it up or to go toe-to-toe with a team like the Rangers who they want to play that back and forth track meet style of game, like maybe they didn't have it as often. Well, this year they do have it as often because no one is scoring more goals in the NHL this year than the Winnipeg Jets. They're averaging more than 4 goals a game. They have the best power play in the NHL. And you know what's crazy? It's that there wasn't big changes to the roster. It's the guys that were there that are doing it and producing. And, a guy like Nikolai Ehlers, who's having a great start to the season, like Mark Scheifele's game, it's kind of taken to another level, if you want to call it that. Like there's a lot of players contributing at a high level, and that's adding to their ability to win games in different ways more consistently than they would have last year, where, how many games in a row did they only score 3 goals? Mm-hmm. But they won those games because they really leaned on the goalie, really leaned on the team's defensive structure. But now you got an extra gear. It's like you have a little more horsepower under the hood, and that's part of the success for the Winnipeg Jets.
This Pierre-Luc Dubois trade just keeps paying dividends for this team, right? Like, it's amazing. Velarde looks so good.
Yeah,
and it's interesting to watch. And then Connor McDavid, technically Connor McDavid, might still be out of the lineup if that ankle injury had bothered him a bit more, but he comes back early, comes back last week. Just, your typical 4-point night. He's 1 away from 1,000. Felt like he could have got to 1,000 on Tuesday night.
It could have. Like, Ilya Sorokin made a number of big saves late in that game, and the Islanders didn't do themselves any favors, although they came back. And that's part of the thing with the Oilers right now. Like, the Oilers are kind of what they don't want to be, is a very top-heavy team.
Right.
Because they're not getting a lot from some of the guys lower in the lineup. So cue Connor McDavid, who has to have 7 points over the last 2 games for this team to have some success. And as time goes on, like, they will have to find ways to get away from being such a top-heavy team, because that was part of the success that they had last year, where it alleviated some of the pressure off McDavid and Draisaitl. But for the time being, like, this is it. Connor McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard, like, Zach Hyman is starting to score now,
yep.
and we're seeing that come to life a little bit, but like they're really going to have to lean on him, and it's nothing new for him. Like, he can do it. He could have had more than 4 tonight, which is crazy to say, but like, the Oilers are right where they didn't necessarily want to be, really leaning on McDavid and Draisaitl.
Now, the Senators shut out the Maple Leafs in the Battle of Ontario on Tuesday night, and Sens just they flat out dominated this game. What would you chalk that up to?
That looked like a team that wants to change their image, how they're perceived. Like, we know the journey for them, right? And this time of year, it feels like for the Sens, is where they really start to lose ground with the other teams in the Atlantic Division, because they've got off to such poor starts, and now it's almost like they've realized that, and they're at this crossroads where it's like, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to keep pace with everyone else in the Atlantic, or are we going to fall back? And tonight, like, they came out with a lot of speed, a lot of urgency, tenacious team. Like, it felt like they were on top of the Leafs this entire game. And ultimately, one game or a couple games, because you go back to the weekend, they did it to the Bruins, they do it to Toronto. Like, that's not gonna make them. You have to do it for a long period of time, but you actually have to start doing it. And at least they started doing it, and now they have to keep it up. But it looks like they want to cement more of an image of what they want to be.
As I'm watching this game on TSN, and I'm watching Kenzie Lalonde do a great job.
Shout out, Kenzie.
Shout out to Kenzie. Great job, Kenzie. All I could think of was last year, maybe this game's different if the Sens don't have Linus Ullmark. Not that Linus Ullmark had to be the best goalie in the world on Tuesday night, but just like what a difference, right? Having a world-class goaltender there for them.
But every time they've brought in a goalie, they thought that was the guy. Right. But like this has to be the guy. Like how many can you go through over the years, whether it's Talbot or Murray or Korpisalo or Forsberg? Like at some point, the guy's got to be the guy. Yeah. And this is the thing for him where, injury-riddled start, like game hasn't come around yet. And now he's, you play a couple where you really feel like it's starting to happen for him. That's huge for the team because it buys you time in a game where maybe not like tonight because they had their legs right away.
Right.
But there's going to be a game where they don't have that right away. And they're going to need to get through that first period. And Travis Green is going to come in that dressing room and he's going to lay the hammer down. He's going to look at the goalie and say, this is the guy keeping you in it. And that happens to every team. And now Ottawa has that luxury if he is playing the way he's played the last couple games.
Is that the kind of speech that Craig Berube gave to the Leafs after the first period? I mean, it
might have been more stern than that.
Yeah. I mean, you see him on the bench a lot. Gord Miller was talking about it during the game, and Mike was talking about it during the game. You see that. You haven't seen that from a Leaf coach in a long time, maybe since Babcock, where it's just like you see him on the bench pissed off.
So Babcock had the scowl.
Yeah.
But Berube, like if you're reading lips, and you're sitting in your living room, you can read some stuff that Babs wasn't going at you the way Berube will or how it looks. And like you can't win a game in the first period, but you can put yourself behind the 8 ball and kind of set the tone for how you don't want to play. And that's what the Leafs did right from the drop of the puck in this game. Like there's a turnover, there's a defenseman, a bad pinch twice, and then, some flybys and, you get good visuals of Craig Berube on the bench kind of laying down the law with William Nylander. And like, Willie's the one guy that gets singled out, but there was a lot of Leafs that were no-shows tonight. And it really comes down to this. When the Leafs were playing good hockey, the last, call it 3 games, let's say, it's like they were patient and disciplined in their approach to the game, understanding when to manage your risk, when to take the risk, when to hang back a little bit. It was like tonight, that was all out the window. Right. First shift of the game, let's go. Let's try and win the game. Like, that doesn't do it. And then you get an Ottawa team, that's really desperate, that wants to start making their mark as far as what they're going to be as a team. And that's a bad combination for the Leafs. But in a way, maybe it's a good thing for Berube to hammer down those details a little bit more.
The Leafs' former GM, who's now the GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins, is making moves, Frankie, and made a pretty significant one on Tuesday. Lars Eller has been traded from the Penguins back to the Capitals in exchange for a 3rd and a 5th rounder. Eller's now 35, 7 points, 17 games this season, his second stint in D.C. He spent 6 seasons there, won the Cup with the team back in 2018.
Are you confused?
This Penguins team.
You look confused.
Well, I actually have gotten to the point where I feel bad for Kyle Dubas because I wonder if he had it to do over again, he might have sat out a season and taken a different job because I feel like another job would have been there for him. And I just feel like this is almost an impossible situation. You've signed Crosby, you've got Malkin signed. These guys aren't going anywhere.
The Karlsson trade.
Right, you made the Karlsson trade.
That was the first order of business, was to get Erik Karlsson, right? And it's a big swing. Like, I can respect taking a big swing and saying, we're going to do something, we're going to be bold, because so many GMs are reluctant to do that. But it obviously hasn't gone the right way for the Penguins. And now you're going to try and move off some pieces and try and see if you can expedite things. It's not an easy thing to do, but they're going to get to where they need to go. Like, for years, they traded picks, they traded prospects, they were trying to win Stanley Cups. They're going to bottom out. But the thing is, no one wants to see the Penguins bottom out at the expense of what could be the last couple years of Sidney Crosby. If Sidney Crosby wasn't there, no one cares if the Penguins are bottoming out. They need to do that at some point. But no one wants to see it at the expense of Sid.
But I guess the problem is, if they keep losing, what do you do? Like, Kyle Dubas is calling GMs, our insiders are talking about it and saying, I'm open for business. Shouldn't he be open for business at this point? Like, shouldn't he be tearing this down? And then there's all this talk about Crosby. Could you actually move him? Could you convince, if they're that bad, I know he wants to stay. I get it.
Yeah.
But could you convince him, listen, we're moving on from this, and you probably don't want to be a part of it while this fire sale happens?
It feels like it's so complex, right? And the thing about a guy like Crosby, a player like that who's so great and has achieved so much, probably would never admit that, like, we're not that good.
Right.
Like, you're just not wired that way. So as an individual, which he's still got game. He's still Sidney Crosby. He's got plenty of game.
Absolutely.
But as a team, they are not there. Like, they're not going to be competing for a playoff spot. And so to wrap your head around that and admit that, like, I feel like the great ones, they don't do that.
Right.
They're so staunch in their belief in themselves and their team. And it's like, no, we done it. We can do it. And we're going to do it again. But maybe that reality is starting to come to the forefront where it's not going to happen. And it's not the thing with Pittsburgh because they were in the mix so long. And you wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. To have 3 parades in less than 10 years, you wouldn't trade that. But, like, at some point, you're going to have to go through that cycle where the team is not good and you build it back up through the draft and trades, and it takes time.
Wish we could talk a little bit more with Frankie, but we got to move on. Buddy, you were great. Thanks for coming in studio with us.
Nice to be back.